When you're delving into philosophy, there's this one big idea that's key for everyone to grasp. No matter which branch of philosophy you're exploring, it's worth having a chat about how it's different from science. I mean, science is all about starting with the hard facts, right? It's all about that empirical vibe. So, we ask science, you're all about the facts, but where do those facts come from? If it says they're just right there in front of me, then it's missing the point. I remember this one time, way back when, I got into a debate with a professor from the sociology department at Fudan University. We used to be neighbors and had a great rapport, so we'd often hang out and have a few drinks. One day, after knocking back 3 cups of yellow wine, he started getting chatty. Being a bit tipsy, he began to speak his mind. He goes, "You guys also talk about the current social realities in China. You philosophers and us sociologists, we're both delving into the nitty-gritty of today's social scene in China. I've noticed something when you philosophers pen your articles." I asked, "What's that?" He replied, "It feels empty, all highfalutin, talking about deep theories, but not really practical." I looked at him and thought, oh boy. I was a bit tipsy too, and I wasn't too pleased. So, I just came out and said, "You're quite proud, aren't you? You sociologists are really proud. You call what you do science, and you call what we do empty talk about deep theories and high-sounding philosophy. Am I right? I think you look down on our philosophy, so now I ask you. Your sociology is called science, and what is the object of your study?" He said it's social facts. I further asked, "How do you obtain social facts?" He said through observation. I immediately laughed, ha ha ha. I laughed a bit strangely. He knew there was something behind it, and he said, "What do you mean?" I said we cannot observe social facts. He said, "What does that mean?" I said, "For example, at 9 o'clock on a certain day in a certain month and year, on Nanjing West Road in Shanghai, a news reporter walked by and found 2 groups of people fighting. As a news reporter, this is a sudden event, and he wants to report it. How does he report it? He must report a social fact, right? How does he report it? Either as a clash between police and bandits, or as a people's uprising, or as a gang fight. You always choose one of these, right? Each one of them is reporting a social fact." "Okay," I asked, "if you report it as a clash between police and bandits, is it something you saw? You didn't see it. What do the police represent? Legal violence of the state, right? Public legal violence. What do the bandits represent? Private illegal violence. Did you see this? You say you saw them wearing clothes, I say bandits can also wear police uniforms. It's not about clothes, and how would you know it's a people's uprising? Or a conspiracy to overthrow the state power? Did you see it? Or is it a conspiracy? You can't see it with your naked eye, right? Or a gang fight, how do you know? None of these are things you saw. According to your actual observation, the report should be written like this: at a certain time on a certain day in a certain month and year, in a certain place on Nanjing West Road in Shanghai, 2 groups of advanced primates were engaged in physical combat. Ha ha ha, this way you report a physical fact, right? Or a biological fact. In short, you can't report social facts. Actually, the facts of physics are also constructed. This is another matter. For social facts to become social facts, it means a physical event is elevated to a social event. Right? What is the premise for this? The premise is that there are rules of meaning that you cannot see or touch. This kind of rule of meaning, Hegel calls it idea. For example, there is the idea of a nation in the hearts of each of us, so we can discover the battle between the police and the bandits, right? Because the idea of the nation is in our hearts. We have a concept of public legitimate violence, so we discover an illegal private violence and a legitimate public violence in the battle, right? We call it the battle between the police and the bandits. This social fact has emerged, showing that social facts are constructed. They are not directly presented to us as independent objects. We have already constructed them, and what do we use to construct them? Ideas. So, like, if someone sees a guy and a girl getting it on, and he's like, oh, they're cheating on someone, and then you ask him, did you see the adultery? How can you see adultery? You just saw them getting busy, right? But he insists, no, it's adultery. What is he talking about? A social fact, man. And how does this social fact even happen? It's all because of the idea of monogamous marriage ethics that makes adultery a thing. So, basically, what I told him is that sociology stems from this. You need to have some philosophical groundwork before you can even start discussing philosophical ideas. Your so-called social facts just don't hold up. Here is the translation to English. The great philosopher who specifically discussed the idea of concepts and the transformation of concepts is Hegel. This is the significance of us studying philosophy, is it not? Similarly, in the field of the philosophy of art, an aesthetic experience, an aesthetic fact, is also something that is constructed. The task of the philosophy of art is to find the thing that constructs this aesthetic fact, this artistic fact, this aesthetic experience. Then Kant said this is a judgment, called an aesthetic judgment. Then it is necessary to explain the nature of this aesthetic judgment. He calls it the a priori common sense. In order to fully understand this, you need to read the book, Critique of Judgment. Of course, we must declare that Kant is a milestone figure in the history of Western aesthetic thought. So when Kant said, the judgment of beauty is not caused by the sensory stimulation of the material properties of external things, but by a judgment of the form of the object itself, and this judgment produces pleasure, this statement was read by Hegel. Hegel then said, Kant has said the first reasonable word about beauty. The first reasonable word about beauty. He said that Kant finally did not plunge beauty into subjectivity, but extracted it as objectivity. This first reasonable word about beauty is what Hegel said. But we also need to know that Kant's aesthetics did not end with truth. He was just a turning point figure. The problems he raised were very large, and they were left for later generations to discuss. This type of judgment that Kant referred to as aesthetic judgment is a judgment that does not have concepts or rational notions as its foundation, unlike logical judgment. What exactly is this kind of judgment? It is not logical, not conceptual. Later it came to be known as a form of sensory activity. It was Marx who clearly articulated this point. So Marx's aesthetic thought is certainly worthy of study, even though he did not extensively develop formal theories of beauty. Let me read an excerpt from Marx's 1844 Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts. Marx states, animals produce only for their own immediate needs, for example, honeybees make beehives, and ants build their ant nests. These can be considered animal production. But animals only produce for themselves, while human beings universally produce the whole of nature. We can see how impressive this human capacity for production of the entire natural world is, compared to how animals only produce for their own direct bodily needs. The products of animals belong directly to their own physicality, while humans freely develop their own products. Animals construct only according to the measure and needs of their own species, but humans know how to produce according to the measure of any species, and can apply an internal standard universally to objects. Thus, human production is distinguished in kind from animal production, in that humans construct according to the laws of beauty. Each animal species' productive activity is purely governed by the needs of its own physical existence. It is confined to the determinations of its own bodily nature. But humans? Their physical form can produce according to any species measure, and crucially, they can apply an internal standard, that is, the laws of beauty, to objects. The law of beauty is the inner scale of the human heart, and it is also applied to objects during production. For example, even the most primitive humans would make simple vessels, like pottery, right? Making pottery serves a practical purpose, as it becomes a container for storing liquids or other items. Once it fulfills this function, it's good to go, right? But when making this pottery, they didn't forget to add some color and carve certain patterns onto it. We can see this in very early pottery at the Shanghai Museum. Now, let me ask you this: does adding patterns and colors to a piece of pottery increase its practical value? No, it doesn't. If we were producing it solely for its practical value, we wouldn't add anything else to it. It would just need to be functional as a container. But humans just can't resist adding a little something extra, even in the most primitive times, like the Stone Age. This is what Marx said, that humans apply their inner scale to objects everywhere. Humans also construct according to the law of beauty, and this inner scale is the law of beauty. What does it indicate? In this sensuous world, people have gained sensuous freedom through the creation of beauty. There is a clear distinction between humans and animals in this sensuous world. Animals also have to seek food and survive in the sensuous world. However, humans not only do this, but also impose a certain order belonging to their inner scale on sensuous things. This indicates that the human spirit inherently possesses sensuous freedom. At this point, it can be clearly stated that beauty originates from the sensuous freedom of the human spirit. If we did not have freedom in the sensuous realm, we would not create beauty. Every time we process external things, it is a bodily need, but there is something beyond it. The body gains freedom in the sensuous world, and the creation of beauty is the freedom in sensuousness. So, in this preface, we have discussed the relationship between beauty and truth, which is the first question of the philosophy of art. What is truth? Is beauty merely a fulfillment of our psychological needs, a satisfaction of certain aesthetic tastes? Is beauty related to truth? We will leave the further exploration of this question for the next class. Today, we will stop here.